Greetings, programs, and welcome back to a new edition of the Awesome Friday podcast. It is now September, the year of our Swift 2023, and we are entering fall movie season. So naturally, we're catching up with some summer movies that we missed. I'm your host. My name is Matthew, and with me today, as is de rigueur, Simon. Say hello, Simon.
Hello. It's lovely, nice. It's lovely to be back, and thank you again to Rachel for stepping in for me last week when I was camping in Tofino. I just want to request that you don't edit out your tuba noises you were making before your introduction to warm your mouth up. That's adorable, so please keep that in. and if we're in full movie season, which is also adorable, that makes me chuckle. Because I've made precisely one joke on Letterboxd, and that's to make a public playlist of fall movies, and the only movie in it is the movie Fall, which I thought was really, really funny. But that's the beginning and the end of my jokes on Letterboxd. But that's a great movie. I'd watch that again. Yes, as we are rolling into the autumn season, we can think about all the things that come with it.
The leaves are changing color, and the films are getting more Oscar baity. And that's how you tell. That's the two ways you can tell that it's the fall season.
It is. Another way you can tell
the leaves in the film and the timbre of the timbre of the films.
The timbre. Another way you can tell it's almost autumn is when you are sleeping in a car park in Tofino. You are cold all night, like literally freezing cold all night. I don't know if you've tried camping in a tent, but I made the mistake of thinking that I would battle to be cool. Like, how am I going to stay cool? It's so hot during the day. Turns out, when you're on the, the western coast of Vancouver Island, and there's nothing between you and the Pacific, it gets really fucking cold. So I was freezing every night.
It sounds like you perhaps brought the wrong equipment, sir.
I mean, this does not surprise me. This is my third time camping ever. The other experiences have been horrific. And this was like 90% awesome and 10% horrific. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction. It's weird, actually, because it was described as a campground. It was actually a car park. It was like a gravel car park with lots of lots which had these little tree boundaries. But you were basically
That's a campground.
I mean, the only one I've been to in BC was Golden Ears, which was the second time I went camping. And the reason that was horrific is that my son had, when he was probably about 3, had too many s'mores, and at 2 a.m. started vomiting, like exorcist style vomiting in the tent, and I was frozen all night looking after him. So luckily that didn't happen again. But in Golden Ears, you have this little glade. Every spot is like a glade, and you've got like forest between you and everyone else. So you can kind of have that experience of maybe I am camping in the outback, but this was like you're in a car park. You're next to a million, and all the clever people have like mobile apartments on wheels, and there's us in our tent sleeping on the floor, mixing with all the people. But it was nice. It was everyone was really nice. It was a family campground, so it had a hard music off at 10, all noise off at 11. Security all night, and it was all gated in, so all the kids could bike around, and it was really, really nice. And
I mean, you're just describing a campground to me. Like this is what they. Right. It's just what they are. Like there's two kinds. You're either camping in the forest, or you're camping at a well manicured campground.
Right. Those are the options. Grass maybe or ground, but no, it was nice. No bears, which was good, and it was kind of a reminder of how nice it is to be in kind of a community of like-minded people. That was quite nice. Although I did feel very, very English when one. The times I feel most English isn't when my accent is misunderstood. It's when I say things like. A girl was sat on a park bench and she had this beautiful golden retriever, and I say hello to all dogs. That's what I do. And he said hello to me, and I was like, "Oh, what's his name?" And she said, "Oh, he's called Tron." I was like, "Oh, that's nice." She said, "Yeah, it's short for Megatron." And I went, "Oh, cool. Are you evil? Are you the evil leader of the Decepticons?" She's like, "No, he's a good dog." And I'm like, "What? But you've named him Megatron. What are the Megatron?"
They're all good dogs. They're all good dogs, Simon.
So I'm like, I almost did my Megatron voice, like Prime, at this dog, and the boyfriend came over and was like, he's got Megatron. He's like, so apparently there's an NFL player who has the nickname Megatron, and they named their dog after their favorite NFL player. He has the
What?
nickname Megatron, and so when I walked over and went, "Are you the evil leader of the Decepticons?" to this dog, the look on this poor woman's face, she's like, "No, he's a good dog."
I mean, so I'm just googling this now because I'm
Oh,
spoiler alert. I am not a North American football fan per se. I'm aware of its existence and I know how it works, but I'm
right,
not a fan. But yes, apparently Calvin Johnson Jr. has the nickname
right.
Megatron,
Who knew?
which is after Megatron. It is after the character of the same name from
Right.
Transformers. So
I just felt suddenly, you know, when you make a very specific reference, thinking it's an absolute lock, and they've never heard of it at all.
yeah,
So
but that's not an English thing. That's just
I'm just
a
awkward.
just a fandom difference, we'll say.
Yeah, just very
Uh,
awkward. But really, it was lovely. The campground had a path directly onto a beach, a beautiful beach, and I've been to Tofino before and didn't really get it last time, but I got it this time. If you're into like surfing or any kind of water activities, it's like paradise
it's
because
actually a
it's
really
there.
great place. I'm not into those things, but what I do like is if you can afford it, because I don't think it's an appropriate way to camp, but it's also a great place to be like in a hotel with a lot of windows during storm season. It's pretty
Hmm.
great.
Hmm.
Just to like sit back and like watch the sea, rage
Yeah,
against the shore, and
yeah.
write dark, foreboding, existential poetry, or
Wow,
whatever you're gonna do.
wow. Is that
That's
your
the
place?
place. That's the place to do it.
I
Like if I was going to write one of them two movies we're going to talk about today, I would have done it in Tofino in a rocking chair facing a wall of windows during storm
absolutely,
season. Uh,
absolutely.
it's
It's. I do
it's
feel
it's
bad
it's
though.
just beautiful.
It was my son's paradise because he's not a city boy at all. He just wants to be in the countryside and do countryside things. And he was biking around and went down to the beach and just went in rock pools and showed me all this cool stuff he's found in rock pools. And it's just he doesn't ever want to go to school. He just wants to exist in that area and just learn about nature. And he was really upset when we left. And we went to Nanaimo then for a night, thank God, in a hotel. Um, Before our boat because the roads are fucked. So we were worried that some of our friends had either been stopped for 20 minutes or 7 hours. So we didn't want that to be us rushing for the ferry. So we went the night before.
Yep.
And in Nanaimo, as I'm sure you know, but I hadn't seen it before. There's a really awesome play park, and then next to it is a crabbing, like a pier where you can go out crabbing,
Yep.
and then next to it is a beach full of like just oysters everywhere and starfish everywhere. And my son is just like absolute heaven. He desperately wants to go crabbing and fishing, so of course he's
You can go
this is
crabbing here in Vancouver. Like you can buy a crab
I don't know
trap and
where
just
though.
you
Where
can
is
literally
there?
just go down to like any pier.
Really?
Like if you go down to like Vanier Park or anything west of that in Vancouver. This is getting very Vancouver specific, dear listeners.
Right. I
But
need to do
yes,
that
you
with
can.
him.
But you can buy a crab trap, and you can toss it off a pier.
Right.
We actually that was one of our when I got married. That was one of our wedding gifts. Was we got like a guided crab catching
Oh, that's right.
day, and yeah, you can just toss the trap off and wait
Gosh,
basically.
I should look into that because I definitely feel the guilt of him living in the city where all of this cool nature stuff isn't at his doorstep is filling me with guilt at the moment. So I need to find
Well,
things he
maybe
can do.
I'll take him fishing sometime.
That'd be nice. How you?
Because I went home to Salt Spring this weekend for a grand total
Yes.
of like 25 hours, which is a bit of a whirlwind trip.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you could do all of those things where I'm from, and it turns
Mm-hmm.
out, and like I knew this philosophically and emotionally and like I knew this on every level, but like I this time because I was going to be short on time, I flew to Salt Spring on a seaplane, which turns out is an amazing way to travel, and it is 10 times more expensive than taking the ferry. But as I was explaining earlier, coming home last night took 5 hours. Like door to door was 5 hours, and flying
Mm.
to there the other day, door to door was 2 hours. So some, even
Yeah.
though even though it's like $175 versus 20, to walk on the ferry. It's sort of seems worth it when you consider the 3 hours of time that you save, and also the fact that the plane holds, I think, a grand total of 18 people, as opposed to the ferries, which hold anywhere from 300 to 2,000. And it's just, nobody likes people, right? That's why we.
But you especially don't like people.
No, that's because they're the worst, aren't they? Yeah.
So
Sorry, I'm talking to my cat right now. She's nodding with agreement.
but
Yeah.
I have a larger kind of a related question for you. Is that I'm in a point right now where I'm kind of done with Vancouver as a city, and having spent a week first of all in this beautiful like beachside area, and then in Nanaimo, which just felt uh, had lots more like nature opportunities and it was a lot more like calmer. So I've been speaking to my wife like, what if we moved to like, somewhere like Roberts Creek on the Sunshine Coast, or even Vancouver Island, just to have that more naturey, seaside, beachy environment for our kids. She won't do it because she's established she's fought very hard to establish a career in Vancouver, and understandably doesn't want to give that up. So my question for you is like, you grew up in that amazing, like, all not off the grid, but compared to Vancouver, a very different lifestyle. And I feel like I really want to get to that lifestyle at the moment. So having grown up in that lifestyle, do you feel a similar kind of urge when you go back to that simplicity or the quieter environment, or the more nature around you?
Uh, I mean, I like small town living, if that's what you're asking. Yes, and I would like to move back to it at some point, and we probably will end up on Vancouver Island at some point. Is my assumption at this point. Um, I'm not super, not super outdoorsy, but I do enjoy like hiking and fishing and that kind of stuff. And there's definitely more opportunity. Like there's lots of that kind of stuff in Vancouver, but it's all very overrun with people, and I
Mm.
prefer the vibe on Vancouver Island and Salt Spring a little bit. Um,
Mm.
the one thing I would say is that it was a pretty great way to grow up, and I feel like I have a different outlook on the world compared to. I mean, honestly, like not to make it sound like it's a bad thing, but like you especially in that like, um, and like your kids, because like when they're in trouble or if they need to blow off steam, they don't really have anywhere to go. Whereas like I was just kicked outside. Like I
Mm.
was a very free range child. We lived at the top of a mile long road that was a 45-degree angle up the side of a mountain, and I knew every inch of that mile,
Mm.
and within like two to 500 yards on either side of it. Because when I grew up, there was also no one. The neighborhood my dad still lives in is full of houses now, but when I was a kid, it wasn't. It was just like forest and creeks, and
Mm.
so and they didn't. It was the '80s, so they just were like, go outside and don't come back. Like when the sun, is if you hold up your hand to the horizon and the sun is hitting the other side of your hand, then that's when you can come home. Like, so yeah, it was a different way to grow up for sure, compared to
Mm.
anyone who lives here. And I don't miss that exactly, but I do miss the vibe. The one thing that I would say, obviously, having spent, because I go back and we go to Vancouver Island fairly regularly, is that as a kid, I would say the one thing that you're going to miss out on if you move your kids, especially to somewhere like, say, Parksville or Nanaimo or Roberts Creek, is that the further away from a place like Vancouver you get, the less diverse it is.
Mm.
And I would legitimately say that that is problem is the wrong word, but it is definitely going to be a thing to contend with it can be a problem, right? Like,
Mm.
because there's just like the place where I grew up is just the whitest place in the world,
Mm.
or maybe second whitest after where my in-laws currently live.
Yeah, yeah.
And to me now, living in Vancouver, like when we go out to, there's actually a really nice little brew pub that opened up in the place where my in-laws live, and I find it legitimately shocking when we go in there and it's full of people and they're just all white. It's weird. Like I find it. I feel like there's definitely an age at which kids need exposure to other culture and other people and other ideas and other,
Hmm.
just to know that people are all different, and they're just not going to get that in a place like Vancouver Island. outside of maybe Metro Nanaimo or like Metro Victoria,
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
and like I say, I'm not trying to say that like everyone on the island is racist or anything like that. That's definitely not true. But there's just, if you're fully immersed with one group of people, then it can be difficult to adapt to a different group of people. And I feel like that's a useful life skill. You know what I'm trying to say?
Good point. Yeah, no, totally. I would love to move to Victoria, but as a part of a family who are currently going back to the UK every 2 years, just moving to the island, I know would add several layers of complication. At the moment, we're 20 minutes from the airport, and I know
Well, it's one
by
layer because Victoria has an international airport. You would just
yeah,
almost certainly have to transfer planes in Vancouver.
yes, yeah.
So
Anyway, shall we talk about our movies? Now we've waxed lyrical about all the things missing from our lives. Let's talk about the two movies.
Yeah, just to get some housekeeping out of the way first.
Hmm.
So for those of you who are our patron supporters, just a heads up, there's not going to be a bonus episode this week for time related reasons, but there will be again next week if all goes to plan. So apologies for that. But if you like what you hear, we do have a Patreon. You can support us at patreon.com/mcsimpson. And you can also find streaming links for both of the movies we're going to be talking about this week on the homepage for this episode, which will be in the show notes. And if you use those links in our show notes to go to the streaming places and buy or rent or whatever the movies, that helps us keep the lights on. So, please do that. And last but not least, the day we're recording is September the 3rd. And as of today, both the ongoing WGA strike and SAG-AFTRA strikes are, they're ongoing. And neither of the shows or movies we're going to talk about today would be possible without the love, care, attention, and skill and talent of all of the writers and performers who are in them. And we hope that the AMPTP comes back to the table soon in a meaningful way, because they have not done that so far.
Also extended to video game acting as well this week. Because,
yeah, it's true. The WGA the board of the WGA unanimously voted to authorize a strike vote, which has a voting deadline of the 25th of this month for all performers who are primarily video game focused or who are working in video games as performers, because apparently their deal has been extended several times. I think it's called the IMA, the something media agreement, has been extended several times with no meaningful updates. And they just haven't been negotiating in good faith there either. So hot labor summer continues.
This will shock you, but they went to negotiate with EA, and EA rejected everything outright. And so they were like, okay, then, fuck you guys. We're striking. I know it's very un-EA to refuse anything like that.
That's really interesting and if you go on social media, you can find a great clip of Adam Driver talking about this. But so Adam Driver is at Venice right now, and he's allowed to be at Venice promoting. He's in a film called Ferrari where he plays Enzo Ferrari. And he's allowed to be there right now. It's not breaking a strike because the company that produced the film he's in, which I believe is A24, it's either A24 or STX International. I can't remember which one. But the point is, they have agreed to literally all the terms the WGA and SAG-AFTRA want. And in doing so, the SAG-AFTRA and WGA have removed those companies from their struck company list. So the actors are able to go and talk about the movies and make the appearances and the promotions that the big studios are currently missing. And the question here is, if A24 and STX International, which are not huge companies, like if they can make these deals, if they can agree to all these terms, why can't Disney, the single largest entertainment conglomerate on the face of the earth, and why can't Netflix, and why can't Amazon? And the reason is they just don't want to. They have no. They just don't.
To sit out.
Yeah, and I think it betrays a lack of respect and understanding of how media works, And I think it also betrays the fact that like the heads of those companies like Disney and Amazon and Netflix are all billionaire tech bros and not film executives like the people who run smaller studios like A24 and STX and and Neon and all these companies that have agreed. You know, like it's very very interesting to see that line being drawn.
Yes.
But anyway, the strike's still on, and we obviously stand with the writers and performers, and we hope to get a deal. But I'm not holding my breath as they're going to get it anytime soon.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. I really hope that it works out for the actors and writers because it's the big studios have very clearly said they're just going to sit out and let people lose their homes, let people starve. Like that's their
they
plan.
have. So the thing that's very useful to me, the thing that gives me hope, is that they keep pulling all this strike busting bullshit. Even as recently as this week, they put out a deal. They put, they they go into negotiation and then they say, they make a part of the deal that the negotiations can't be made public, and then when it doesn't go their way, they leak it anyway. Like they break their own word. And their stated hope is that it'll sow division within the WGA and within SAG-AFTRA, so that like the rank and file might be like, take the deal. We want the deal. We just want to get back to work. Take the deal, and perhaps take a deal. Their hope is that they'll take a deal that's not as good as the one they want. Like, right? Not as good as the one the actors and writers want. But the writers have been walking around together on strike picket lines for over 100 days, and the actors are over 2 months now, and they're all talking to one another and realizing that maybe like no, like this is just bullshit from the studio. This is just bullshit strike busting, and I think it's really interesting and important. It's a really great example of how social media can be actually very important in these things, because every time this happens, it gets outed, and people and just regular people like you and I are like, well, that's bullshit. We're not just
Yeah.
relying on like the last big strike, and I spoke about this with Rachel last week a little bit. The last big strike was right before the era of social media, and so the only narrative we got was the one in the trades, and the trades are part of the problem, right? Like they are also media conglomerates. Some of them are owned by studios, so it's very like one-sided, and you can see that in reporting from like Variety and Deadline and the Hollywood Reporter and all of those places. You can just see it in the way they write their headlines. They have a clear like management bias, right? But social media is allowing the counter narrative to get out that like, no, this is bullshit, and you love to see it because it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And I sincerely hope. I think it feels like the writers and actors are all very much in solidarity with them. Like the unions are all very much on the same page in terms of like the rank and file. So I hope, and there seem to have many of the very successful actors giving huge donations to keep them taken care of on the picket line. So my hope is that they get everything they ask for. And again, like if they can get everything if A24 and STX can give them everything they're asking for, then Disney, Netflix, Amazon, Warner Brothers, Paramount, all of them can. It's just not a question, especially when you consider that it amounts to like less than 1% of their annual revenue. It's crazy. Anyway, I could rant about this for ages, and I have. So let's move on. Let's move on and talk about some movies. So we're going to talk about two movies that came out on streaming in the last week or so, both of which are I would say they're reasonable. I don't know if they're hits from the summer, but they're reasonably well received movies from the summer. One is a horror movie and one is an animated kids movie. And let's talk about the horror movie first. I don't know.
Sure.
Let's talk about the horror movie first. So,
okay, cool.
The first movie we're going to talk about is called The Last Voyage of the Demeter. This is directed by, and I'm so sorry, I cannot pronounce this person's name. It's Andre Overdat, I think. Overdahl?
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah. He's Norwegian. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I have trouble with Norwegian names. Um, and it's an adaptation of one chapter of the novel Dracula. And it is the chapter where Dracula is being transported from Romania to England on a boat in a crate. And if you've read the book, which I have, but not recently, the chapter is basically just like the captain's log of this ship, and it's basically like, we left Romania, and then like, oh, somebody died, and oh, there's an evil on this ship, and then the ship like runs aground in England, and everybody's gone.
Yes.
And that's the whole setup. And honestly, that's a pretty great setup for a movie. I don't know if you're aware of this, but like that's a pretty great setup for a movie, and it has been
It's
done
a great
before.
chapter. Yes, it has. It's a really great chapter.
It's a really great
Dracula.
chapter. And it's
Yeah.
the movie, as it turns out, is basically just what if we made Alien but put it on a sailing ship?
It really is, with a couple of like exact shots as well from Alien, which I
Yeah,
think is probably, it feels intentional as a love letter to Alien rather than ripping off Alien. So I didn't mind, but it is very much Alien on a boat.
I mean, it actually honestly makes me wonder if like the guys who made Alien read this book and were like, "That was a great chapter. We should do that." You know, like.
Yes. Oh, that would be
um,
interesting.
but so yeah, the story picks up. It starts in media res with the Demeter washed ashore in England and someone picking up the captain's log and finding, like, boarding the ship and finding that it's empty and there's like blood and gore everywhere. Um, and then it cuts back to a couple weeks before, where the Demeter is taking on crew and cargo, um, and about to set sail for England. And the main thing they take on board is these 50 crates from an unnamed rich person. And they also take on board um a young man named Clemens, who's played by Corey Hawkins, who is he's obviously a black man because it's Corey Hawkins, who is a doctor and accomplished. I don't know if he's an accomplished sailor, but he certainly knows his way around a boat. And he's like the audience insert character for us. And then they set sail, and then people start dying. And I don't really want to spoil it because most of this movie is very fun. Uh, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's a great film or like gonna change the way that we view horror films or anything like that. But like, if you want to watch a movie where there's a monster stalking a bunch of people, some of whom are very stupid, in a closed location in the dark, you could do a lot worse. Would be the way I would say it. Um, and I think there's a couple of great performances. I think Corey Hawkins holds his own very well. I really like Aisling Franciosi, who plays sort of like, she's on the ship. She was in one of the crates. She turns out to have been like a sacrificial person for the captain of the boat.
She's his to-go meal.
Yeah, the captain of the boat is played by character actor Liam Cunningham. The first mate is David Desmalchian, with like the best bad Romanian accent you can imagine, Russian accent you can imagine, and basically you just watch all these character actors like react to a monster, and the monster design is also, I think really interesting, like really good, in terms of like the sort of Nosferatu design of like a half man, half bat. I think this one is interestingly, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's interesting and intricate while also not feeling like a major departure from that classic design. What can I say? I like this movie, except for the very end.
Yeah, so here's the problem. I really, really like this film. I think I liked it more than you did. I love Alien. I love things trapped on a thing with a thing.
Yeah,
like the thing, or like people trapped in a place, there's no hope, but they got to work together and the thing is picking them off one by one. Sign me up. Like, I just love that as a concept. So I think it works really, like Stoker knew what he was doing. It works really, really well on a boat, and it's a really great chapter that's been expanded on. And this is actually quite close to the book in some regards, and then it leaves out some of the first mate in the book actually has a different, slightly different fate than in this one. It's a bit more direct in the film, but that's fine. That's what you'd expect. And I do like how the Dracula, it is Dracula, is this classic Nosferatu, and I'm in two minds about it because the reason you can see the design is that you see Dracula pretty clearly from early on, and I think this is one of the big departures from Alien, which in turn learnt a lot from Jaws, and that's you shouldn't show too much too soon, right? There
I
was
think yeah,
very little. It's very little for your imagination to fill in the gaps here, because you kind of see him in moonlight, in like streaks of moonlight pretty early on.
yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot because there was another movie I watched recently that definitely has this problem. It's the classic like once you can see the monster, it's not scary
Hmm.
problem, and very famously actually something that the people making Alien realized during production. So like when they were making Alien, there's actually a lot more of the alien in the original script and in the original like assembly cut of the movie that they were like this isn't scary, and they made it scary basically by cutting out
Hmm.
every scene, every wide angle shot, and almost every scene of the alien. And
Hmm.
and you're right. I think this one you do maybe see a little bit too much of Dracula, but I'm actually a little bit willing to forgive it because it's such a classic design. Like they're not
Yeah,
trying to hide any weird twist, or it's not a
yeah.
new thing that you need to be scared of. Like you already know what it's going to look like,
Hmm.
and so they're able to focus on just creating that atmosphere and like what's coming. And I think that's a
Yeah,
good choice. And
yeah,
I also think it's not like not to say that the monster here is like a fully fleshed out character, but there are definitely moments where you realize that like it is a conscious being with internal thoughts. It can speak, and so I think in showing it a little more, they give it a little bit more opportunity for it to say
yeah,
things. And I
yeah.
think
It's a
that
bit
that's
more of a
also in it.
character. Yeah.
It's a bit more of, it's not just a nameless, faceless shape
Hmm.
in the dark. It is a thing that is actively taunting them. Like it's not like a manifestation of pure id, like the alien, like the xenomorph is, right? Like it's
Hmm.
just this is a being that's like actively uh, hunting them. And in fact, it's even called out at one point that they're like, it's like that it's just rationing them, like it's only eating one of them a day, and that's
Hmm.
because it like needs to survive all the way to England. Like it's actively
Hmm.
rationing them as well. And I think that all those choices are good ones. I think that the movie is not incredible, um, but like I also would say that it is it's very good. It's very fun. There's I always like Liam Cunningham. I think that there's maybe the Nosferatu is maybe a little bit too much CG at certain points, um, for me personally, but also in a way where like I don't really know how else you would do it in those times. Um, and yeah, I don't know, man. It's a good movie. And here's
It's
the thing: it also works really hard for the R rating that it has, and I think that that is a thing we don't get enough of these days. Because
I think
there's some pretty exquisite gore.
yeah.
In a couple of the kills are very brutal.
And one thing it gets really, really right is that Dracula is a book about sex and penetration and bloodletting. And the thing about Dracula feeding is that it is so close to like loving sexual embrace, and it's the whole book is about this paranoia about sexual diseases and young women. It's no coincidence that when they get turned, they suddenly become these sexual objects. So, like young women with sexual freedom is the scariest thing. And when Dracula feeds in this movie, I think that it makes some really really smart directorial choices with the gore that you mentioned, but also with the shots, and that um, there's lots of embracing and holding well
Hmm.
during the drinking with the person actually awake and feeling it, and I think it captures that very weird sexiness that's very at the core of what Dracula is.
Yeah, you're
I
not
thought that
wrong.
was really good.
You're not wrong. There's definitely a in lesser vampire films, it's often like the vampire like bites the neck and like takes one big drink, and then the person's dead, and that's the end of it. And
Yeah.
this is very much like Dracula tackles you and holds you down and sucks your blood out for long enough that some people might be uncomfortable with it. We'll say.
It's a bit rapey.
Yeah, it's a bit rapey, and yeah, I think that's also super smart, and I think they get the atmosphere right, and I don't know how you market this film. I think like it hasn't done incredibly well at the box office, but also like how do you market a film that is an adaptation of a single chapter of a classic book and it has an R rating? Like it's a difficult movie to market, and
it's completely hamstrung as well in that it's an alien movie, but it's an alien movie that can't kill its alien. Like the thing about these movies that I always get the biggest kick of is the satisfaction of how they beat it in the end. Like that Scrawny Weaver punching the airlock open twice, and
yeah,
or the way they beat the thing, even in the thing they don't, but there's a satisfaction of outwitting it. And when you have a chapter from one of the world's most famous books with one of the world's most famous characters that you cannot kill because that's the lore it's coming from, then I think you've got to work really, really hard to find a satisfying conclusion. And this movie went for an angle that I know didn't vibe with you, and I don't think it's a very satisfying ending at all. Like, there's none of that. Hell yeah, we beat the monster, because it's like, well, you didn't
no, but
really.
and I don't want to spoil exactly what I'm talking about when I say that I legitimately like I fucking hated the very ending of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I will say is that all they would have to do, like they could film almost exactly the same last scene and modify the intent, and it would have been great.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about as much as I can say without going full spoilery, but like
Does
again,
get a
like
bit
it's.
Len Wiseman, doesn't it?
I mean, it's honestly like all it needs. Like if someone else, it just needed someone else to look at the script and be like, maybe the intent of this scene is a little different.
Mm.
And I think it could have been great. But as it is, it's just empty sequel bait for
Mm.
a sequel that, like, I mean, I think it would be
Can't really
good.
happen.
I think it would be interesting to give this movie a sequel, but it would be like, from that point, you would have to be like creating a story whole cloth,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah, for sure.
it's sequel bait for something that even if it
We
could happen, almost certainly wouldn't, right? Because of
Yeah,
the nature of the material it's being adapted.
yeah, exactly. It's already
So
written. Like the next thing's already written. So
yeah, and
you have
like
to like
and to be
work
fair,
around it.
like I'm fully on board with like just create a story where like a thing happens over the course of a day, while Dracula's going to Carfax Abbey. Like there's an opportunity there, but like it's just I just want films to be okay with being themselves and not
Mm.
needing to set up a sequel.
Or just
And
don't make it Dracula. Make it like Dracula's buddy is also joining him in
or just
Carfax.
any or
Like,
just or just any other
whatever.
vampire, like make an original
Yeah,
vampire. It's
yeah,
a
yeah. But I really, really like this film, even though it's one of the films where you can look at the cast list and you can work out what order people are going to die in. Like, you know exactly when someone is about to die. You've seen this movie done a million times before if you've watched anything like Alien or The Thing before, and that there's no surprises, save one maybe, but there's no surprises in the order that anyone dies. As soon as you see Liam,
Cunningham.
help me, Cunningham, and you see David Dastmalchian, who I really like. I think he's a brilliant actor. He's a great character actor, and I keep hoping.
He's having a hell of a year too.
I just want him to get like even bigger. I want him to break out of this like character actor thing and just be a leading man, because I think he's fantastic. But you know damn well they're not gonna. This isn't like uh, um, Deep Blue Sea. Like, there's no like we're gonna kill the famous person quickly just to shock you. You
Well,
know the
there's not.
order of this.
To be fair, though, there's not really a famous enough person to do that. This is
Well, but
almost
it's
entirely.
recognizable.
Yeah, but all the people in this movie are either up and comers or established character actors. There's no like super famous person at the center of it, right? Like
But
it's
out of the cast, there's two people that you would recognize immediately. So, and they are not the people that die first off. I haven't seen Corey Hawkins in anything before,
I am
but
100% sure that you have.
I
He's been
feel
around
like I
for a
want
while.
to. I feel like I want to because I thought he was really good in this, like really
Uh,
really good.
I mean, Corey
Oh,
Hawkins.
He's
Yeah,
American.
yeah.
I thought he was
Um,
English.
Corey Hawkins got his
Huh.
start. He was in the NWA movie Straight Outta Compton, and then he also had small roles in like I think he was like a soldier in one of the Marvel movies. But then he was in Kong Skull Island. He was in Black Klansman. He was in Six Underground, which I know you watched.
Oh, yeah.
He's in the Heights, which I'm pretty sure you watched. He's in
Mm-hmm.
Macbeth, which I know you watched because we
Oh,
both loved
yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
He was Macduff in Macbeth. Like we've definitely seen him in stuff.
God damn it! So his British accent's perfect. By the
Uh,
way, because I thought he was British. Damn
yeah.
it! Oh well, good
So
for
yeah,
him.
he's
But
been
he
around
was
for a
great.
while, but he's never had his like he's had his like oh we're gonna put this guy in movies moment now with Straight Outta Compton, but he hasn't really had his like oh this guy's a movie star now moment.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
The what I was really thinking a lot during this movie, because it is written, it's quite straightforward. It's not written badly. It's just quite straightforward. And I was thinking a lot about The Terror, the TV show with the boat stuck in the
Yeah.
ice with similar kind of thing, and how absolutely perfectly that is written in such a creative way. And I was kind of wishing this to find a bit more of a creative voice in its writing and the way it went about its story.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes when you know exactly what's going to happen, it's still fine if it does it well. And it did most of this
Oh
movie
yeah.
pretty well.
A well
I did
executed
enjoy it.
story is a good thing.
Yeah, it did. It did. On that note, there's a Love, Death, and Robots episode called Bad Traveling, which is a little bit similar in how it starts, but it does find an original way to not just be a monster picking off people one by one. It's a similar era vessel gets taken over by like a giant crab-like creature, but the way they deal with it is slightly different. So I really recommend checking that out.
Hmm.
And so I was thinking about that a lot as well. What if this movie found a bit more of its own voice creativity than just being a monster movie on a boat? And it never really did that, but I still enjoyed what it was. It was well executed. I enjoyed the classic vampire design. It sold itself a lot on a lot of physical effects, but there was a ton of CG in this movie that wasn't entirely successful. But on the
Yeah, but
whole,
there was a
it
lot
was
like
fine.
a lot of the gore seemed practical, which
Yeah,
was I liked. It's just
there's
mostly
a lot.
like again there's a number of moments with Dracula where you're like there's a lot of makeup on that person and also a shit ton of CG.
Yes, yeah, yeah, no, for sure. But I found it really enjoyable to watch. I just wish it had stuck the landing. I wish it had found a way. And actually, your suggestion of changing the tone of the end, I think, would have worked perfectly to make it a bit more like It Follows, where they're just dealing with it, like accepting and dealing of it, or
So
big
I don't
like
want to talk about it
knowledgeable
because
of it.
I don't want to spoil it. But like after we're done recording, I'll tell you what the one how I would change it to make it I think better.
Okay, fair enough.
Um, and it's not even tone; it's literally intent of the scene, not
Yeah,
tone.
I think I know what
And
you're getting at, and
and
I agree.
yeah, but you
So
know,
how many stars for you?
but also, I just want to point out that David Dastmalchian is having, I think, an incredible year. He's been in at this. I can't believe this list because I just looked it up. I can't believe this list. He was in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Boston Strangler, The Boogeyman, Oppenheimer, and this. And that's just a hell of a year, no matter how you slice it. Not all of them are great. Like we both, I don't think, really liked Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, but The Boogeyman is good or good enough. Like The Boogeyman is interesting because I also watched that this week, and they're sort of this and that are both sort of fine. That's the other movie I was mentioning really suffers from the like once you see the monster, it's just not scary anymore.
Right.
But he's great in Oppenheimer. He's exactly perfectly cast in Boston Strangler, which is not a bad movie at all. Like he's having a big year. He's also he voiced in some animated stuff as well. So he has a film he's got another film that he stars in that has just not, it's played the festival circuit, but it's just not out yet. So he's having a great year.
It's been very satisfying watching him for years and years and years, like creep up the size of his parts. I feel like, I don't know this for sure, but I feel like he probably went the background route, and then he definitely, when I first saw him, he was in non-speaking parts, and he's just so eye-catching. He's not just the way he looks, but he's got great presence, and he's also hugely skilled as the ability to conjure up different characters. So yeah, it's really satisfying to see his career trajectory just go up and up.
Yep, from like schizophrenic goon in The Dark Knight to this, I think is a great trajectory.
Yeah. So how many stars are you giving this then?
Well, it's 3. It's fine.
Yeah.
I see a lot of the people reviewing it who are like, talking about how it's maybe a knock. I totally get and understand the criticism that it's basically a knockoff of better movies, but I still think it's well executed. Like it's not perfect, but this is one of those movies where when people say like, where are the mid-range movies for adults? There's one in theaters right now, and you can go watch it. Like, and it's on demand, so you can watch it. So yeah, 3 stars. And you?
Yeah, 3 for me as well.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. It's good.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. It's a perfectly, and like I watched it at home, and the option was to buy or rent, and I took a chance and bought it, and like I'll definitely watch it again. So yeah. Well, shall we move on? Let's move on to our second summer catch-up movie, which is the children's animated film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, which is a bit of a mouthful. And why don't you take us through the very basics of the plot, Simon?
Well, how can I summarize this? In a half shell, they're the heroes for. In this day and age, who can ask for more? It's another origin movie of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and like Batman, I don't ever need to see the origin of the Turtles ever again. But it's a Seth Rogen reboot, because there's also 2 other animated Turtles reboots going on at the moment, and this is probably the biggest profile one. It's a movie as opposed to like a Nickelodeon TV show, and it owes a huge debt in style to Spider-Verse, as does so many other things, because it was so influential. It's got a mix of very chunky, almost claymation-looking animation with lots of hand-drawn highlights and expressions for sound effects and things.
Yeah.
And the difference with this, I mean, the origin. It tells the origin of the ooze going into the sewer and turning these 4 turtles into mutating them into humanoid form and being trained by a humanoid rat to do ninjutsu and then fighting baddies. And the key difference here is that they are Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the teenage thing here has been interpreted as like 13 instead of 18. And if you are a fan of the other movies, including the live action movie from the 90s, 80s,
90s,
90s or 80s, which is a bit clunky, but it's got a good heart. All the other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle adaptations treat teenagers like 18, 19, and this uses them as like 13, maybe 14 maximum. And
they're in the story they're 15. Like they're exposed to the use. It literally says 15 years later.
Oh, does it?
But
15, oh, it does. Yeah. But anyway, teens instead of old teens.
They're younger, anyways. The point.
Yes, age appropriate voice actors, and they have a little bit of fun with their relationship with Bebop and Rocksteady and the other mutants, and the big bad is Superfly instead of Shredder or Kang, and or is it Krang? I can't keep track of all the Kangs.
Doesn't matter.
Um, but didn't really work for me. I there's it's got some really good fight scenes. It's very dynamically directed, but I think the decision to make them really the younger teens, it's there's lots of like kind of references to that age group that I just found them annoying. I just found their kind of shtick really annoying, and also I don't think I realized it was going to be like a Batman Begins kind of deal. It was them at the very very beginning of what do we even do with our weapons? Like what do we even do in this situation? And I also found the art style quite ugly. And all once I realized that it reminded me, so the claymation style is kind of got over exaggerated caricature style of bodies, and almost like slow lower frame rate, like clayish bodies with those accented highlights, and it really reminded me of the MTV style, like Celebrity Deathmatch, that kind of animation. I just found it
Eh,
quite ugly.
I sort of I sort of see that. Um, I didn't love it, but I think it works. Um, for me, like I actually really like the choice to make them a little younger. I think it makes it clear that um, as a person who grew up when the Ninja Turtles were like coming up in terms of like their pop culture influence, um, I think it's really important and interesting, but also important that this film is clearly not meant for me. Like this is not. I think the choice to make them 15 makes it clear to the audience, but also in a way that I think it hasn't to the filmmakers before, at least that I've seen, because I haven't seen every Ninja Turtles thing. But like it makes it clear to the filmmakers that like we are making a movie for children and not a movie for the 40-year-olds who were children when this was new. And I think that that's important. Um, and I think it works. Like, I don't think you're wrong that some of their shtick was annoying, but I find 15-year-olds annoying. So I don't know. Like, that squares for me pretty well. And I do think that even though they were annoying, I think that the casting of age appropriate voice actors, because I think they're all 17, 18, 19, um, was a good choice because they didn't just sound like adults doing kids' voices. They sounded
Yeah.
very natural in character.
Hmm.
And even though they are like, sure, they're annoying 15-year-olds, I will concede that point. But they're also clearly four brothers who love each other and have like loving, dynamic, lived-in relationships that don't need to be like exposited on screen. You can just tell from watching them for 3 minutes that they are a set of four brothers, right? Like they,
Hmm.
all of the writing in terms of their relationship with Splinter, with their dad, is also really, really well written. Um, and all of the motivations, especially Splinter's motivation for keeping them in the shadows, in the sewers, is, I think, very well written and very well executed. My problem with this movie is that it feels about 20 minutes too long.
Hmm.
Um, I think it sags a little in the middle, and I think that it has it has a chance for like a very resonant thematically on point ending, and then it keeps going for 20 minutes.
Hmm.
And I feel like all of the points that they're trying to make in that last 20 minutes, which to be clear is gorgeously animated, but I think almost all of it could have been handled by taking the best parts of those sort of two endings and putting them together,
Hmm.
to create something a little more cohesive, and b, it would sort of maybe tighten up the rest of the runtime as well. But I sort of disagree as well. I found the art style. Uh, I found it very interesting and dynamic, and I think ugly is the wrong word, but it's very striking for sure. And even though it owes a huge debt to Spider-Verse, because as every time we watch an animated film these days, that's what we say, right? Because it is so influential.
Yeah.
Um, but what was I trying to say? Basically, that like the art style is manages to also be very distinct within that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
where because this is very much a mix of like it almost looks like the initial drawings were done by children. I kind of love that about it.
Yeah.
And it is a bit blobby and outsized proportions, but I absolutely love that like if there's like steam in the background or like mist in the background, like that's just like crayon or pencil crayon.
Yeah.
There's a great scene, and it's just a single shot where they're looking down from a building down to a street, and there's street lights, and like the light coming out of the street lights is obviously just like pencil crayon squiggles. And
Mm.
I love that. I love that kind of detail. I think it's I mean, if you don't like the art style, which is totally fair, you're not really gonna maybe agree, but I think that like the level of care and detail in the art is incredible. And maybe I mean, I would argue that the art style in Across the Spider-Verse is better, but this has at least the same level of care, attention, and detail. And
Mm-hmm.
and I love that. So, I didn't love this film, but I think I liked it. I think it's the opposite of the last film. I think that I liked it more than you did. So
Mm. Yeah, I did like. I liked the the hand drawn aspects, and I liked the care. And also, honestly, a lot of the shots, especially the action, the fighting shots, are really creatively done. There's a
yeah, for sure.
great combined fighting scene where they decide to hit these three sort of gang groups, and it cuts them across. So it basically choreographs the same fight but cuts between the three groups in a pan across the screen. It's fantastic. And there's a car chase later with lots of panning around, and there's some really good creativity in it.
I will
It's
also
mainly
say I will also say best use of No Diggity since the first Pitch Perfect.
the soundtrack was on point for sure.
Yeah.
The it's just I didn't I found the character models just I didn't like looking at them. I didn't like and I think that's so important when you how you engage with something animated is how it makes you feel when the visuals like hit you. I
Yeah, that's
like
fair.
the background accents, but the main models I just found them really I'm not a big fan of caricature. I think that's probably a big part of it as well. And
I
I
I
found it
wouldn't
annoying.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that any of it is caricature.
Oh,
Um,
I mean it is.
I
Like
mean,
the if
perhaps like sure the turtles kind of look like blobs, but they've always kind of looked like blobs.
it's
But like the
more the
human,
humans really.
no, I would say exaggerated, but I would disagree that they are caricatures personally. Um, I think they're exaggerated in the same way that like but I prefer exaggerated features in animation. Like I actually find animation where they're trying to look as realistic as possible to be super boring, and I would rather look at these ugly. If they are ugly, if they're, I would rather look at these like ugly, misshapen characters than like ones that look like real people most of the time. So I don't know.
I don't think there's a big spectrum between caricature and reality. Like it's something I mean when you look at Spider Verse, those aren't real people, but I love that art design. I
Yeah, and that's fair.
like
I mean,
that approach.
in this case, like taste is taste, and I don't think I wouldn't go so far as to say I love it. I just personally don't think it's ugly either. I think that's too far. But taste is
Well,
taste.
yeah.
So, and the rest of the voice cast is on point as well. I love that it seems to know this movie has a lot of mutants in it, and I love that it doesn't really overuse any of them.
Some
But then
pretty great casting too.
but you also have like in the background you have Natasha Demetriou and Ice Cube and Hannibal Buress and like all these like great performers who are delivering short interesting lines. Rose Byrne has one of my favorite line reads in the whole movie, and she's like, I think she was doing. She should probably at some point she was in the recording booth, and they were like, "No, no, Rose, more Australian, please." um, but it works great. And then you also like, and I think of all the cast, like again, I think the kids are great, but I think that Jackie Chan is inspired as Splinter in this film, and I also really like that, like the way they come to be ninjas. Like the way they've always come to be ninjas in the media that I've seen before is because there's some like connection to ninjutsu, and in this case, that is just not the case.
Yes.
And
No, I like
and
that. Yeah.
and I really love that choice and detail. The way they decide to learn to be ninjas is great. So, yeah, I don't know. It's I think it's good. I think it's good, not great. I think most of my biggest problem is that I just think it's a bit pacey and a bit overlong. So, but I also I will probably watch it more times. I think it's fun. The parts that are good are great, and then it is also too long. Is my problem. So
On the Jackie Chan note, if you are interested in watching another movie where Jackie Chan voices a ninja master training for senseis to fight back against an evil, then I recommend the Lego Ninjago movie,
he's great in that for sure.
which is probably one of my funniest one of the funniest things a Lego movie has ever done was have a character who is clearly a robot and speaks like a robot, and nobody ever refers to it. I just think that just tickles me the right way. That
Doesn't he also like insist that he's not a robot at
yes,
several times?
yes, of course I'm not a robot. As my mother always used to say, and like modem noises, and no one ever refers to it. It's the funniest thing. That's totally my humor. So how many stars are you giving for Turtles?
3 stars for the baby tortoises for me.
I I really wanted to like this movie, so I'm a bit disappointed. It's a 2-star movie for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I see where you're going with it, and I get it. That makes sense. So again, for me, I think it's good, not great. Would be the way to sum it up.
I mean, I hope they make a sequel because they sure have opened the door at the end. The very obvious door is opened at the end.
What's interesting to me is actually just on that note is that what's interesting to me is that this movie also does some like ridiculous sequel bait, but it's interesting that really the only difference is that it is a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene, I guess in this case, which because it's like not part of the main narrative, I'm sort of fine with it because I've wanted to. I can just ignore it.
Absolutely, yeah, totally, yeah, it works totally differently. But good. I'm sure 15-year-old boys are gonna love it.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. We haven't really talked about it. How your kids reacted to it because I think did you watch it with them or not?
Yeah, we watched it together and they laughed. They really, really liked the mutant ensemble and how distinct they are and how they talk together. And it's kind of nice. It's not really a spoiler, but when they all kind of realize they just want to be buddies, it's just I like moments like that in film, and they liked it more than I did. It's very interesting to watch their reactions afterwards. Like the main reaction afterwards was them singing Four Non Blondes "What's Going On" at the top of their lungs at 10 o'clock last night. With me trying to get them to bed because that's used brilliantly in this movie, and they'd not heard the song before, and so they put it on and sang to it really badly for about 20 minutes.
I mean, that's what you do with Four Non Blondes, though.
but
also, I would say, just as a side note, like we talked, like the soundtrack to this movie is incredible, and the score, which is a Trent Reznor Atticus Ross score, is also incredible.
I had no idea they did the score. That's great.
Yeah. It's interesting because my nephews, who I spent some time with this weekend, they saw it in cinemas with their dad about a week ago, and they're a bit younger. They're 7 and 9, but they loved it. So
yeah, I'm sure.
I think again, I think for the target audience, it's going to do really well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, well, let's wrap it up there. We've talked about our 2 movies. If you have liked what you've heard, feel free to support us. There's several ways to do that. We do have a Patreon at patreon.com/mcsimpson, and the lowest tier is only $2 Canadian a month, and you do get our weekly bonus chats along with that. But you could also, tell your friends, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, give us a 5-star review. All those things would help get us in front of more earballs, which we very much appreciate. I'm totally drawing a blank on what I say next. We record this here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. That is the entirety of the show for this evening. So thank you for joining us and for listening on this awesome Friday.
Thanks. Bye.